Good evening, believers. Welcome everybody out there who are joining us tonight for this history-making moment. In St. Louis, we are making a lot of history this week, and tonight is no different. Tonight, we have a really important guest with us. She is the true genius, Dr. Gholdy Muhammad, who is the author of Cultivating Genius. Now, before we get started with Dr. Muhammad, I just want to go through a few housekeeping kinds of things. There will be an opportunity for all of you to ask questions. We'll have a question and answer period later on. If you're on the Zoom platform, just enter your questions in the Q&A box, and you can start doing that immediately because I know all of you have already read Cultivating Genius and you have questions and you're ready to go. If you're on the Facebook platform or the YouTube platform, simply put your questions in the comment section. And even if you just want to bear witness to something great that I know Dr. Muhammad is going to say, share that in the comment section as well. Tonight's conversation, we hope, will be an introspective one. This experience is a collaborative effort between St. Louis Regional Literacy Association, which is a chapter of the Missouri Literacy Association, St. Louis Black Authors of Children's Literature, and Turn the Page St. Louis. Tonight's event is also sponsored by the generosity of the Robley Foundation and our friends at the Opportunity Trust. And we just want to say thank you to them. My name is Julius B. Anthony, and I'm your host. Of course, I'm a believer. And welcome, Dr. Muhammad. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Julius. I'm so happy to be in your presence and company and all this beautiful work you all do.
Thank you. I want to take an opportunity to read your bio to our audience. I can't believe any of them don't know you, but they may not know all of the awards that you've won. So I want to share some of those. Is that okay?
Sure. I don't think I would have a choice, would I?
Okay, right. Dr. Gholdy Muhammad is an associate professor of language and literacy at Georgia State University in Atlanta, Georgia. She serves also as the director of the Georgia State University Urban Literacy Clinic. Dr. Muhammad's scholarship has appeared in leading educational journals and books. Some of her recognition include the 2014 recipient of the National Council of Teachers of English Promising New Researcher Award, the 2016 National Council of Teachers of English Janet Emick Award, the 2017 Georgia State University Urban Education Research Award, and the 2018 University of Illinois at Chicago College of Education Researcher of the Year Award. She is the author of the best-selling book, Cultivating Genius, an equity model for culturally and historically responsive literacy. So we know you are a researcher, but here's what's really exciting and important to me. Dr. Muhammad is actually the representation and the continuation of the greatest of our Black educational thought leaders that have been with us over history. We can look at people like Dr. Juwanza Kunjufu, Dr. James Comer, Dr. Asa Hilliard III, Dr. Janice Hale Benson. Dr. Muhammad is in that group. She is the continuation of that work. And so tonight we want to have a conversation about Dr. Muhammad and how she came to be the person that she is. One of the things I know for sure is that she has some connections to St. Louis and to Cahokia. And so you have a lot of friends on the platform tonight from St. Louis and Cahokia. And I had shared with Dr. Muhammad earlier that every person that I know that knows her and knew her back in the day, they all had the exact same thing to say about her. They said that they knew from way back when that Dr. Muhammad was going to do something exceptional in the field of education. And I see that as a person that has this special light. It's a divine light. And so I'm interested in knowing, where does that come from? And so, Dr. Muhammad, why don't we start here? I'm an early childhood person, elementary expert. And, you know, we believe that who we are today is a reflection of some of our earlier experiences. So, can you just start the conversation by telling us, where are you from? What community do you come from? What people shaped you as an early person?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Thank you for the beautiful introduction. And I'm so happy to feel like I'm back home a bit in terms of my connection in the St. Louis area. You know, I'm from Gary, Indiana. That's my people, that's my roots. And you know, I grew up there and then later moved out to the suburbs surrounding Chicago. So I had some mixed experiences. You know, I was at a school growing up in elementary where I saw many teachers that looked like me. And then going to the suburbs, around Chicago, I did not have one teacher of color. And, you know, I'm able to speak to the impact that that has had on my life. And, you know, I had many teachers in Gary, Indiana, starting with my mother and my sister. And I remember having a good number of Black women teachers in Gary throughout my elementary experience that just taught me and modeled for me and shaped who I was and helped me to understand myself and my Black girlhood and my identity, while also helping me to learn those skills. And that really matters, to see yourself, because that's, no matter where we go, we look for ourselves, we look for aspects of ourselves and our identity. And so I was always looking for myself when I moved out of my home and my context into this new place. And it was hard. It was difficult to see myself in schools, in the curriculum, in the schools. But you know, when I think of my roots, I'm going to think of, you know, my schools in Gary and my community, my Muslim and Islamic community, because that helped to shape my thinking, my identity, and really help to shape who I am as an educator today.
All right. Now, you talked a lot about the people who really help you to understand who you are. When you think about the experiences that you had in the classroom as, let's say, a kindergarten through third grader, what about the literature, the books, the text? What, did you connect with any literature that really helped you to understand who you were? Did you see images of yourself when you were a student at that age?
Yeah, I mean, I remember reading the very watered down books that were steeped in whiteness in elementary, even in a Black city like Gary, Indiana, could still have curriculum that did not look like Black and brown children. And we know that
Yeah.
that's a problem still today. I felt like it was always the teachers, they did something to go beyond the curriculum, because I was able to discern between the curriculum and what the teacher was doing extra, you know, through the assignments. And I felt like it happened, but it was always extra, but it was not there in the foundation. And
Mhm.
it lacked even more when I left Gary, Indiana, and went to places like Aurora, Bolingbrook, and Naperville, Illinois, where I really didn't see myself in the texts and in the books. And, you know, we had to take something, British literature and not African American literature in high school. And so everything, I mean, I made connections sometimes, but sometimes I didn't, you know. And so I had to be honest, I had to pick up the pieces that the school, where the schools failed me.
Yeah.
And so it was college, when I went to Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, where I had to pick up literature that I connected to literature that had my history, my liberation, my identities there. I either had to do it through myself or when I had a professor. And I had to sort of like fill those missing gaps of understanding my Blackness,
Mhm.
my Black girlhood and womanhood, and all of who I am, because schools just did not provide opportunities, and they certainly had the room and the space to do more and to do better.
Mhm. What about your peers? When you were attending school in Gary, Indiana, I'm assuming that most of the children that you went to school with were Black as well. Do you think they had the same experience that you had? And
Yeah, and we had each other too, and that made
yeah,
a difference. But yeah, and we still keep in touch, my friends from
yeah.
kindergarten onward. And so it was a difference. Even in Gary, I had white teachers in Gary and Black teachers, but we felt the difference. And we felt that when those teachers went above and beyond and gave us the imagination and the experiences connected to our history,
Mhm.
that was felt and
Mhm.
understood. And I'm so glad they did that,
Yeah,
because I had somewhat of a foundation and a protection when I went to middle school and high school, where I did not have those experiences.
okay, yeah. I asked that question because I know that sometimes some children, when it's an all Black situation, experience the learning situation differently. Even if you have loving teachers loving on you, some children don't feel that love. And even if you come from a home where there's a lot of love given to you that help you to really shape a positive and confident image, some Black children don't have that. And so I was wondering, were those children in your classroom as well?
Yeah, and I would say they did. And we all know when it is affirmed and cultivated in our community, it
Yeah,
helps even more. So
yeah,
I would say yes, when I connect with them, we all had that. We all shared that.
that's
And
wonderful.
yeah, and we all affirmed that for each other as well. And we were taught to affirm each other.
Talk about the process for learning how to read then. When you were in elementary school, what was that process
I remember having what they call today decodable texts.
like? Mhm.
And what we know about decodable texts, I remember seeing like images of characters and farms and situations that I didn't have a direct connection or interest to all the time. I looking back now and thinking about the text that we read, and when I was learning how to read, I always loved books.
Mhm.
I would my mother would like give me like, well, if we go to the Salvation Army or somewhere, she would like give me an unlimited book budget, and I would like fall out with books. That age, I wanted books around me. Um, and and we were always reading. But the books in school, again, unless the teacher went above and beyond and brought in different kinds of texts, those programs I remember were just so like, it was such a formula to it. And I never really
Mhm.
saw myself, but I followed along because that's what we did, right?
Right. Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
I don't have many experiences having relationships with text and
Mhm.
significant, meaningful connections with text in
Mhm.
schools, unless it was like those few times where the teacher or the librarian connected a book to myself or to my own life, or if I went and found that book for myself. That was when it happened. And
Yeah.
so I remember being read to a lot at home.
Mhm.
Um, I remember us having lots of time for literacy. I remember us having art and music and other multimodal learning,
Mhm.
which supported, I felt like, me learning how to read, not just learning how to read, but loving reading as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. You know, thank you for sharing all of that. I think that your experiences really help us to understand your perspective and the philosophy that you have created under Cultivating Genius, particularly your perspective on the whole idea about the pursuit of criticality.
Uh-huh.
Um, can you talk more about that? Because it sounds like your experiences are aligned with that particular perspective. And so, did those experiences help inform your thinking around criticality?
Hmm. So, first I need to say I felt like I chose teaching at one point in my life as an adult, but I felt like teaching always chose me.
Mm.
I gotta say, I remember studying, even as a young child, studying the teacher's instructional moves.
Yeah.
And I remember them. And like I would think, like, why would the teacher do this? Even in high school. Like, why in my high school, some of my high school friends were the student teachers because I wanted to learn from them. And even when playing school with my little brother, I didn't realize it, but I would spend hours creating curriculum just to teach him,
Mm.
my older brother, who probably already knew. But I wanted it to be fun and engaging. I've always had a focus, on curriculum and engaging kinds of learning. And so
Mhm.
I say that because I have experienced points in my life where I was in Gary, Indiana, and I was in the suburbs, and in between, I went to an Islamic school.
Mhm.
And each and every moment, I was sort of data gathering. I was collecting data on these schools and what they were able to do for me and what they weren't able to do. And I was studying the teachers and what they did to engage my mind and my heart, my spirit. Again, I have the language now more so than I did back then. And I was able to now like articulate the problems in the pedagogy,
Mhm.
the energy of the teachers and things like that. So I'm saying all that to say there was something very special inside of me that knew I was supposed to be a teacher.
Mhm.
And I take all those experiences, and of course, with my knowledge from books and research and studying, and then when I was an administrator with curriculum and instruction in Cahokia, I saw all the problems that a lot of children like me face, and how we can start doing things differently.
Mhm.
And so, in all of my experience in my own education, and then as a teacher, as a coach, and as a school district administrator, I said, it's time for a different way. And I
Mhm.
started to feel sort of like intellectually confined, like this cannot be it. We have to do more and better. And so by the time I got into graduate school in Chicago and I started studying the history that schools never taught me, I
Mhm.
started really studying my people and blackness and black folks and black excellence and black genius and black joy. And I said, they did all this in 1837 and we cannot do this now.
Mhm.
And so that research took me to look at what were their goals of education. And they had goals much more advanced than we have in 2021. They had in the early 1800s.
Mhm.
And criticality was one of those goals. Now, criticality is the ability to name, understand, critique, disrupt, hurt, pain, and harm, oppression in the world, to make sure that your voice is centered and to self empower yourself. And to make sure you're creating a better humanity for everybody else. Now, for Black people, that has always been on our agenda. We have always had agendas of liberation. We didn't have a choice,
Mhm.
but not just the liberation for ourselves, but the liberation for others. And so, if we only taught like what our ancestors taught us to do, then we would have different schools. We
Mhm.
will have more beautiful, more
Mhm.
culturally responsive
Mhm.
schools where we are preparing all children, but uniquely Black, Indigenous, and children of color, to know themselves, to love themselves, and to have confidence where they don't have to overcome so much from our system.
Mhm. So, Dr. Muhammad, how do we help teachers then today understand their purpose? You know, when we have these kinds of conversations, teachers are looking for strategies. You know, what kind of strategy is Dr. Muhammad going to give me to help me make sure that my kids have those reading skills, those literacy skills, all of those kinds of things. But what I hear you saying that it starts from another place. It starts from a deeper place inside. It's about also understanding your purpose. So how can we help teachers to get that part of the learning experience?
Well, it's a little problematic to ask for the strategies first. If
Yeah.
I can go into my therapist and say, what should I do tomorrow? They'd be like, you got some work to do internally first, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I don't care who you go to. You could go to a church leader. You got some work to do first.
Absolutely.
So before I give you the strategies and the supports for your hand, first I have to make sure you have the mind work, the intellectual work. See, we have been, those of us who are teachers, we have been educated mostly in the theories of Vygotsky, Dewey, Piaget, reading sciences, and Maslow. And we have learned from so many white theories, and then we wonder why we struggle to teach Black children, because you have not learned from Black theorists like Mary McLeod Bethune and Anna Julia Cooper and Carter G. Woodson and Elizabeth Flood and Clara Muhammad. If you learn from them, you learn how to teach the children better. So first you got to read. You got to unlearn some stuff. You got to read Toni Morrison and James Baldwin. They should be at the center of teacher preparation, but they're not. We have been trained by methods. We didn't have courses to be intellectual in our thinking and in our theorizing. The next thing, or at the same time, we need to work on our hearts. You know, we still say a lot of deficit things like calling students non-readers, can't read. They, you know, that's not, Julius, what professionals say. My ENT doctor doesn't say, Gholdy, you can't breathe. She says, Gholdy, you struggle breathing through your nose at night, because she's a professional. But that's what I hear. If she were to say I can't breathe, that's just simply not true. Our students can read. They struggle with reading print text, perhaps, or decoding. We need to talk like professionals. We cannot just say things like they can't read. They can read you up and down. Have you met a child like that? They can read their social context. That's reading. It's a different kind of reading, but it's reading.
Indeed. Indeed.
And so when we get the mind and the heart right, the love for our children, and you got to love us. And I'm talking about a critical love. A critical love means that every day you work toward our anti-oppression, that you're working to make sure we are not marginalized, misrepresented. That's critical love. Giving us curriculum or books or pencils, that's not necessary. That's just love. We need critical love. And if you, I want to be clear, dear educators who are listening, if you are teaching skills only to Black children, as an example, you're not doing right by them fully. We have said many and many time again that Black children need a little bit more. Indigenous children and children of color need a little different. And I can argue that all children need the same pursuits connected to those skills. We're not in a skills only world. And so when you teach skills that are decontextualized to students' identities and genius and joy and their worlds, and then you'd wonder why they're not retaining the information, is because you haven't made it responsive to who they are, connected to who they are. And so you should expect some students to not respond to that, because it's against their heritage, it's against their bloodline. You must teach to who they are and the souls of our people.
Yeah. Now, Dr. Muhammad, I'm from the Baptist church. And
Okay.
Did you see my head going like this a lot?
I already knew you were from the Baptist church.
I almost said amen, but I was like, hold on, Julius, don't go there.
No,
But
that's okay, because you need to show up as your full self and not check
amen,
any of your identities. That's the problem,
amen,
right?
amen,
Be your full
amen,
self.
amen. Teach me, and get me right.
You say amen and I say I mean.
Yeah, there
It's
you go.
all love.
It's all love and it's all faith, right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Muhammad, can a teacher do that in a system that says that she should be doing something else? So can she show up as this loving person? Can she show up as this person who can get head and heart right when a principal is telling her, I need you to do something different, or a district is saying, do something different? Can a teacher exist differently?
Absolutely. And they better exist differently. You got to
Yeah,
ask yourself, who are you accountable to? Are you
yeah,
accountable to the children and their families or to your principal?
yeah,
Foremost, okay?
yeah.
If you are foremost accountable to your principal, you're going to struggle with what I'm saying.
Mm.
But if you are accountable to those families, you got to imagine, Julia, somebody trusted you with their child. That's the most precious thing. Someone trusted you with that child. I'm going to say it one more time. Someone trusted you with their child.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if your principal, you see, we when we lose our purpose and why we're doing this work.
Mhm.
See, I was not accountable to my dean. My goal was not to get tenure at a university. My goal was to do right by communities and schools. And if I get tenure along the way, okay. And if I don't, at the end of the day, I can say I did right for those children in their schools. Because, see, I'm accountable to something different than just my dean or just my school principal. So, in my model of cultivating genius, I talk about 5 pursuits.
Mhm.
5 learning standards, but Black people did not call their goals learning standards. That did not come from Black communities. We call them pursuits. Isn't that a more beautiful word,
No
Julius?
doubt, no doubt,
Like, do
no doubt.
you want a pursuit or do you want a standard? See, a standard has a ceiling, a stopping point,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
and a pursuit means I'm learning this for my life, for
yeah.
self-determination and self-reliance and self-empowerment.
Mhm.
And they had 5 goals. They said every time you teach a child, you help to cultivate their sense of identity. How is your lesson or unit plan helping a child to learn something about themselves?
Yeah.
Affirm themselves, love themselves. The second goal is skills. What in this case, we're talking about literacy. So, what literacy skills are you teaching?
Mhm.
Number 3 is intellect. What are students becoming smarter about? See,
Mhm.
we would like work with teachers, reading teachers, and they say they became smarter about fluency. That's a skill.
Exactly.
What are
Amen.
they reading about? They're not becoming smarter about decoding and citing textual evidence. And so that the intellectual goal means that I'm learning this with a purpose.
Mm.
The 4th goal was criticality. How is your teaching and learning connected to justice and
Mhm.
helping students to critique systems of power and injustice and inequities? And the 5th pursuit is joy.
Mm.
How are you elevating beauty and truth and
Mm.
happiness?
Mhm.
Now, elementary teachers, they are the ones for joy. It's usually the people in middle and high school where the joy just kind of fades away a little bit.
Sure.
But Julius, if we go back to your question, your principal is asking you to do one of those things. Which one? Skills.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm asking you that it's almost like we're operating at a 20% proficiency level of proficiency as a system. Out of the 5, we're only doing 1. That's 20%.
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, when we wonder why we have 20% proficiencies, is because we were always teaching at a 20% level. You've been
Mhm.
teaching these skills that are so devoid and so boring and so disengaging. And then when
Mhm.
students do not achieve at a levels, it's because we have always been at 20%. So if you have a principal who's asking you to do 1, and then I'm asking you to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're still giving your principal 1, but you're going above and beyond. And that should be celebrated.
Mhm. Mhm. Dr. Muhammad, talk about your research because everything that you just shared, a lot of it I know comes from your research. The things that you learned about how teaching was happening with Black children in the 1800s. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that connects to the philosophy that you just shared, the head and heart philosophy?
Yeah. So, we look at proficiency numbers all the time as literacy folks, right?
Yeah.
Something's not right. Either the test is jacked up or the system is jacked up, or
Yeah,
both.
yeah, yeah.
It cannot be the child when we have no examples
Mm-hmm.
of like across the largest urban cities. They should be excelling. Why is that? I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And I got tired of it. And we all should be tired. As a matter of fact, we should all be enraged thinking about literacy and what schools are not doing, what communities may
Okay,
be doing.
stop, Dr. Muhammad.
Okay, you gotta
Amen.
stop me.
I gotta say amen. I just want to throw that in there. Go on, keep going.
You
You
quick
told me to show up as me. I'm
You're
sure.
quick
Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So, it's like we all should be enraged, and people without children should be outraged. Everybody, the people that work at the bank, everybody. This is a community effort.
Amen. Yeah.
And so, that led to my research. And I started studying in the 19th century. I started studying Black readers and writers and thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
And I just fell in love. Julius, I would read about our ancestors. It was a mixed emotions. One, I was a little upset that no one taught me this before.
Mm-hmm.
Every Black person goes through that.
Yes. Right.
When we learn something, we like, why did nobody teach us this?
Yes.
And then mixed with that upsettedness
Yeah.
was pure love. I was falling in love with my people. I would write poetry back to our ancestors.
Wow.
And what they were doing. So I would read this is my research. I would read all these historical artifacts and archives, and I would just fall in love. I was living in Chicago, so I would go to the Harold Washington Library and go to the top floor, and they had a reading room, and you couldn't bring anything inside, and they would bring out the documents that our ancestors wrote on a pillow, and you couldn't even touch the pages. They like, all you could do is look. Don't drool over the pages because they were precious primary source documents, right? And so I would just read and fall in love. And it was like our ancestors were guiding me. Mm-hmm. They were moving me into these different goals or pursuits that I mentioned, and they were giving me the playbook for education. I just felt like, Gholdy, there's something special in you. And there's some previous teachers I think I worked with in Cahokia. Let me tell you.
Professional at all. Go ahead. Go ahead. You just got me upset. Go ahead. But joyful upset is not
upset. It's a good thing. Listen, I would my first year teaching, I would go to a workshop and thought I knew everything. And I would do my own PD based on that workshop and hand out flyers to other teachers, come to my after school workshop, like it's a party, come to my workshop. And so I'm saying that to say this, I felt the specialness of being a teacher leader inside of me. And then I felt my ancestors guiding me to the goals of the playbook, the guidebook for what we need in education today. Yeah. And so that's how my research came to those pursuits of saying that we need new learning standards, number one, and we need better curriculum, number two. We need better assessments. Why aren't we assessing joy? We talk all this mess about learning loss. What about joy loss? And then we talk about learning loss with no data. Yeah. And then, we need to change, in addition to the standards, curriculum, and assessments, we need to change teacher evaluation and teacher education. And so I felt like through my research, I was guided toward these 5 pursuits that will help to reframe a whole system that reframes curriculum, standards, assessment, teacher evaluation, and teacher preparation. And that's my research is really, and teachers have taken to it.
Yeah.
They love it because so many people talk about theory.
Yeah.
And they don't talk enough about the practicality of it. Or so many people talk about the reading science, but folks don't know how to blend criticality with reading sciences and the emergent literacies.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you plan on scaling this thing up? Now, here's the thing. You are the voice. And there are others, but you are the voice, the genius voice on the education stage right now. We're talking about literacy and Black children. Your name is one of the first names that come up. And all of the kinds of things that you just shared with us are the things that we know that we should be doing. Maybe everybody don't know it. I know it. Those are the things that we should be thinking about, this head and heart practice, this understanding that it really doesn't matter what the system is, get in that classroom and do what you know is right by children. Let love be your compass as you do that. But we have to, if we're going to change system, we got to have a plan for that. The great thing is that you are part of a teacher education program. And so you're training teachers in the way that we want education to be realized. But that's just one place, Dr. Muhammad. And so our challenge is, how can we get this to be a broad-based understanding? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, that's all I think about. I wake up and think about. I'm like the educational hustle man. Like, what you need? You need interview questions. You need a plan for our U.S. public school. That's me. That's all I do is write out a plan. And I can tell you some parts of my plan.
Good.
First of all, I want this to be very clear. At the U.S. Department of Education level, with our Secretary of Education and those who work alongside of him, it's very clear to me. The first thing we need to do is create a better set of learning standards. The Common Core is not common to Black folks and not at our core. You know, if it doesn't have identity, it's not common to us because we need goals of culturally responsive and historically responsive. We need goals of equity. And so we have so much genius in this country that we can create a new revised set of Common Core standards overnight if we desired to, if we're willing to give up the ways that folks are profiting off of Black and brown failure. Okay, let's go to my second point plan, curriculum. The U.S. Department of Education has enough funds and resources to create a free curriculum for all of its U.S. public schools. It can be a free curriculum to help teachers and students get free. You know what I'm saying? Liberate their minds.
Yes.
Free and free. The third thing they have to do is change how our assessment system. Assessments are too heavy and pressure for even the thought of a state test makes teachers like cringe a little bit because of the heaviness of it. And then at the same time, those tests are incomplete and flawed. And they do not truly measure the full genius that we need to function well as an adult. You can have a student who scores very highly on those assessments who does not love Black people and who might hurt them as they grow to be adults. It's time for us to change our assessments. The U.S. Department of Education can do that. And start to create frameworks and guidelines for different states. Okay? And, you know, I think we can also have a new teacher evaluation system. I study curriculum for a living. I rewrote the Common Core standards myself. So I know how to be better.
Is that published yet? Are you publishing that?
I'm going to wait to see. I'm waiting for a call from the Secretary of Education.
Amen. Amen. We all
But
gonna be looking like that.
of course I share. I share everything. Seriously,
Okay.
I share everything
Okay.
because I mean it's in my mind. Anytime I complain about something, I rewrite something or try to create
Okay.
something. And so
Yeah.
I share that with my fellow educators because sometimes we need to see that there is a possibility of a new way.
Yeah.
We do not have
Yeah.
to keep doing what we did in 1638.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
are still doing what we did and see, I mean, we made some progress, no doubt, but you
Mhm.
know, it's amazing when I connect the past that was problematic. We still do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. We do. We do. We do. Dr. Muhammad, the folks are telling me I'm taking too long. I gotta
Okay.
get to the Q&A.
Yeah, because we can talk all day and night.
I know, and I still have a million questions. Um, but let me get to the audience. This question is from Kathy McCain. Do you
Okay.
have suggestions for getting a child to relate to her Blackness when she is hesitant? She is adopted by white parents.
Mhm. Um, through literature, through books, through text. Text is going to be the text, not just books, but video, image. You must show her the genius and the joy of her Black girlhood, and she must know Black women and girls, and know who she is, and have sisters. You know, I got to tell you, every time I'm down, I'm struggling with something, it's the Black women and girls that keep me. And that girl needs Black women and girls in her life. And you
Amen.
have to teach her who she is.
Mhm.
And even if you're not an expert, you're adopting a Black girl that comes with some great responsibility. You do
Mhm.
not start her stories or her history off with slavery or with struggle or pain. You started with genius and joy. That's really the
Mhm.
nature of my book.
Mhm.
And you educate her in who she is. And if you
Mhm.
don't know, then that means you got to do a complete study of Black girlhood and Black womanhood. I have published so many articles on it. That would be a great starting place. If not me, somebody else.
All right, amen. So, Dr. Muhammad, let's step out there, and I have other questions, but I got to ask this one. You brought, you brought up the whole idea about using text and not starting with slavery and text around slavery. Well, how do we convince these major publishing companies, and I won't call any names, how do we convince them to give us more literature, more books that's outside of that context? How can we get,
This is too easy.
come on, we still need it. Give it to us.
You stop giving them money.
Okay.
It's that
Amen.
simple. And you demand it and
Yeah,
say, we will not continue to fund you and to
yeah.
support you until you give us this. You stop, you be funding them, you're feeding them, and then you're saying,
Mhm.
but I need this. That's an
Got it.
easy one. Give me a hard question.
Okay, let's see. Let's see if this one is a hard one. This comes from Danielle, Switzerland. How do you communicate these learning principles to non-teachers who have direct contact with children? For instance, foster parents and other caregivers of children who are in the system and not living with their birth parents.
You know, I do a lot of workshops with community members of these populations.
Mhm.
I teach them the model. So I do what teachers do. I teach them. I make it impossible for them to fail and to not understand the model. I teach
Mhm.
them the 5 pursuits and what it can look like through read alouds and short text, where you don't have to be an experienced or professionally trained teacher to do it. And so, if you want to see some examples, I post them on social media sometimes, but I'm happy to share. I teach them how to teach the 5 pursuits through song, through
Mhm.
videos, through
Oh,
read alouds, like the
oh.
Sankofa read alouds. I
Mhm.
teach them through short stories, through like shorter and engaging forms of text.
All literacy. All
Literacy all the time. It's in my blood.
yeah.
Literacy is in my blood.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Matter of fact, you called out into it. You already told us that. And I
I have
didn't
a choice.
look, and I was going to say that could preach, but I, I won't go there. Okay. This question is from Melissa Spratlin. Many of our state elected officials and education advocates talk a great deal about how important accountability is and how we need standardized testing, state level, to know how our students are doing. Would you share any thoughts about this? How do we have productive discussions about this? You talked about the federal level. How can we get our state level, our state departments of education to understand this as well? And I know one of the things that you might say, once we change at the federal level, all of that changes at the state level. But go ahead.
Maybe, I do stuff at all levels. We cannot wait for the national level to come knocking at our door. I don't wait for the state people either. If I learn something, I do better. It's that simple. I don't wait to do right by children and their families. And so folks like me, we're not against accountability.
Yeah.
I want us to mandate justice and fire those teachers that do not love our children well enough to teach them with excellence. So you can say that I love me some accountability. And I don't have a problem with testing. As I said, I have a problem with testing as it stands. And so, people only talk about standardized testing because skills is all they understand. They don't understand the complexity of racialized identity and gender and sexuality and all these other things that help to shape a child's self. And so because they don't have a handle on it, they're not going to mandate it. But they can get scholars in that will help them. And so my advisement is the same. If you're talking about a state level, let's take it down to the superintendency. Superintendents have a lot of power in school boards. They can do the stuff that I am advising at that level. It's like we use it as an excuse to wait for the state or the national government to do something. You can teach excellence right now. You can teach identity, skills. I'm going to break it back down for you. Intellectualism, criticality, and joy tomorrow. Who are we waiting for? Why are we waiting for permission?
We're waiting for ourselves. That's what we're waiting for.
Ourselves.
We're waiting for ourselves. Let me take one more question, and then we're going to wrap up our conversation and move to the next thing. This is an interesting question from Kathy McCain. How do you encourage white teachers to get on board?
Well, Kathy, it's just not white teachers that need to get on board. It's a lot of people. We got to say that first. And sometimes I debate with my skin folk.
Yeah.
It's more people who have either been decolonized, who struggle with racism, are racist, or they think they have fear and ignorance. And James Baldwin said, when fear and ignorance come together, it's dangerous. Let's just take white teachers since you asked about them. See, if you think that if I teach in this way, if I center Blackness, you're decentering my whiteness. That's not the truth. I mean, it could be the truth. I don't know. But they think that their child may not benefit. I'm not trying to generalize because this is not all white people. But I have been in spaces working with different parents where they think that if I teach something that is a Black model, it's going to decenter what my white child needs. And that's not the case. It's only going to lift them up. So when I'm working with anyone who is against this work, I ask them one simple question. Do you understand how racism works? And what have you read to center your understanding? What are you against? Are you against identity, skills, intellect, criticality, or joy? I mean, for me, I'm not here to sell this model. Just like my mother should not have to sell to me that I need water every day to keep doing this work. It sounds silly, right? Like I should just know that I need to drink water. You should just know that what this is something that's needed for the betterment of humanity. And we must be more human. So are you against humanizing practices? And what about our humanity are you against? Because we got folks, Julius, who do not want to teach about Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, but they'll teach, Anne Frank you know, and other folks. Like, stop it. Stop with the oppression Olympics. And know that if all lives really matter, then you should have record of showing that in our curriculum, in our instruction. And to and I also finally say this, you know, after I try to get to the root, because I'm a teacher educator, so I try to work with folks. I try to get to the root of ignorance and fear before I diagnose a reading list or whatever they need. Some people need therapy. You know, if you really cannot love us, you cannot teach us. If you do not know us, you cannot teach us. So that's really what it is.
Yeah. And I would say that goes across race.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
like I said, you know, it's some people that they feel comfort with teaching skills. If you tell me I got to teach criticality, I don't know about criticality. I'm not even woke. See, talking about messing with their self-efficacy, and who wants that mess with?
Indeed.
Nobody wants that messed around with.
Yeah, Dr. Muhammad, this has been rich. I mean, I'm transformed from this conversation. And I'm going to look more critically at my practices and some of the things that I say. And I'm one of those people who advocate for joy for Black children and for there being a different way in which we Black children experience learning. But this has been a transformational conversation, experience. I'm sure that it was the same for our audience. Leave us with that one thing that you would want all of us to walk away with from this conversation. What would that be?
You know, I would, it's hard. One thing.
I know.
I want to say it's possible. When you feel like there's nothing, achievement, you're hitting a roll. Trust me, it's time for a new way. I have the recipe, if that's what you want to call it. I have the guidebook and the direction. Our ancestors, so many of us have it. It is possible. And the last thing I would say, it's important. Love must be at the center of this. And we need each other because transformation does not happen in isolation. We need each other. We need to build upon each other. We need to hold each other accountable for our thinking and our actions and our practices and all of that. And we need each other to build and to disrupt and dismantle. So I'll just say that. I know it was 3 things instead of 1, but you know.
We need it all. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for taking this time. Thank you for giving of yourself and helping us all to be better human beings. Thank you for helping us believe, because that's our thing. And everything that you share with us tonight helps us to do just that.
Oh, thank you, Julius, for your genius, your joy. You have so much joy. I want to just be around you some more.
Well, let's make it happen. Let's just make it happen.
Yeah. Shout out to St. Louis.
Thank you. God bless you.
You too.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal, Dr. Muhammad.
Thank you.
We're gonna please stay on for just a few more minutes. We're gonna show you how you can get a free copy of Cultivating Genius. So hang tight. I want you to mark your calendar. This is the first inaugural speaker of our 2021 speaker series, Racially Relevant Literacy in the Pre-K through 3rd grade classroom. So mark your calendar. We're going to be coming back to you in September 9th and September 23rd with Dr. Rochelle Washington. She's going to talk about the warmth of other suns, educating the children of the Great Migration. And Thursday, October 12th, Dr. Stephen G. Peters, president of the International Literacy Association, going to talk about, do you know enough about me to teach me? Next. For those of you who registered for tonight's event, you are also, and attend, you are also going to get a free copy of Cultivating Genius. So thanks to our sponsors, the Rob Lee Foundation and Opportunity Trust. So I need you to look over to the right side of the slide. If you are a St. Louis public school teacher, you will pick up your copy of Cultivating Genius at the St. Louis Public Schools headquarters at 801 North 11th Street. Please contact Dr. Esther Paulsberger, the elementary ELA curriculum specialist, for more information. If you are a Believe teacher, and you know if you are not, a Believe teacher at a Believe project school, the books are going to be delivered, dropped off at your school next week. So hang tight. For everyone else, this Saturday, April 10th, from 10 a.m. to noon, you can pick up your free copy. Julius and I are going to be hanging out at the Missouri History Museum in 5700 Lindell. And we're going to be at the entrance that looks out over Forest Park. I call it the back entrance. It's the new front entrance. You'll see us. If you have any, next slide, questions, and we really do have to thank everyone. If you have any questions, whoops, next slide. There we go. Please feel free to reach out to Julius or me, lisa.greening@turnthepagesTL.org. My cell is 314-540-7670, specifically about any logistics. Let's continue the conversation here in St. Louis. Dr. Muhammad, thank you so much for your time, expertise, and joy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I'd like to end tonight with an original poem. I think it kind of summarizes much of what Dr. Muhammad shared with us. This poem is entitled Decidedness. Someone said I couldn't do it. It would be too hard for me. I said, okay, you will see. I will climb the tallest tree. Someone said I couldn't do it. You are too small. I said, okay, I will show you all. I can scale the thickest wall. Someone said I couldn't do it. You are too weak. I said, okay, just watch me sail the widest sea. Someone said I couldn't do it. You aren't that strong. I said, okay, how many times you're going to sing that same old song? Never tell me what I can't do. I am the one who will see it through. Good night, everybody. Thank you for being with us. God bless you. Always, always believe.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.